Welcome to the Hunger for Justice series. This episode is being recorded and will be available for public viewing on YouTube. Again, please choose your language. The live stream will be in English and the recording will be in Portuguese, available on YouTube. A Growing Culture is a nonprofit organization advancing a culture of farmer autonomy and agroecological innovation. We thank you for joining us today. And we also want to thank the Agroecology Fund for partnering with us today on this episode. And here is Lauren Cardelli, the founder of AGC.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Hunger for Justice broadcast. What an honor today to be featuring MST, an organization that is close and dear to AGC's heart and has been an inspiration since the beginning. To provide a little bit of context here, right? In Brazil, 0.1% of the population controls over 40% of the wealth, right? That inequality, that inequity, what does that look like, right? It looks like over the last 25 years, more than 30 million agricultural workers have had to give up their land. 4.8 million working families do not own their own land. This is a serious problem, and it represents a major trajectory to the consolidation of not only wealth, but land. Right? Previous episodes have touched on this topic, right? We've heard Queen Quet of the Gullah Geechee Nation, right? Talk about this. KMP from the Philippines, the Korean Women Peasants Association, right? Policies, trade policies, neoliberalism affect peasant and smallholder farmers all over the world. We will be hosting a very special event on Indigenous Peoples Day, an all-day broadcast on October 12th, which will most definitely touch on this topic of land theft as well, right? So one thing is we might understand like how this works a little bit, right? So when you map out around the world and you map out biodiversity hotspots, you look at those areas which contain the most amount of biodiversity, right? And then you map out cultural diversity, which is usually referenced by the amount of languages spoken, right? Those maps are one and the same because there's no nature without culture. There's no culture without nature. They go together. When you look at climate vulnerability, it is the same map that you're looking at. And when you look at land theft, it's happening at the same map. These same centers, right? These same connection points where all this theft is going on, which is affecting biodiversity and cultural diversity, right? Now in the US, with our Promethean optimism, we're rolling out social impact investment. A lot of this investment, companies are organizing around land for sustainability. But let's ask these questions about social impact and how the greenwashing of land theft is a dangerous trend. We recently had a film reach Netflix this week about our food system that didn't feature a single migrant worker, a single landless farm worker. When we look at a food system where so many people who are contributing to our plate, to our food, don't own the land that they farm. Land is freedom, land is liberation, and land is a right. So I am so excited today to be learning from one of the largest social movements in the world, MST. MST has been an inspiration and a North Star to AGC's ethos over the years. So today, we proudly, in partnership with Agroecology Fund, an organization that truly understands the value and power of land, we present to you Emmy from Brazil.
Olá.
Hello, I'm Adriana, a militant in the Landless peasants movement here in the state of Paraná, Brazil. I'm also part of the international relations team for the MST. Together with Ceres, we'll be talking about hunger for justice, solutions that the landless peasant movement has been proposing to Brazilian society in the struggle against hunger and to deal with the pandemic. Ceres, go ahead. Good morning to all of you. I'm thankful for the invitation. Adriana and I, in the name of the MST, we're glad to be here with you today. I'm Ceres Adich. I'm on the board of the MST. I'm a settler myself in a land reform settlement in the north of the state of Paraná, southern Brazil. And it's very important for us to have this dialogue, to share our struggle and to share in solidarity, talk about our land reform with you. I also want to make a brief presentation on the MST. Maybe not all of you know what it is, although it's a movement that's fairly well known by the media. Since the late 80s, early 90s, after the military dictatorship Brazil, it emerged as for the struggle for land and for land reform, for reforming society overall, and came out of a historical struggle of our indigenous people and forest people, and the peasants who came together, who became the people of Brazil in the rural areas, but their dreams were never realized in terms of a real land reform over 500 years. So our land reform has gone slow, generated many conflicts over the past century, and the MST inherited that situation. So we were fighting against the latifundias, the big landowners, and the lack of democracy and access to the land, and also to confront the hegemonic model in the Brazilian countryside, which is agribusiness. In addition to all the evils of the latifundio, the land concentration and concentration of income and of wealth, and the abuse of the land and the natural resources that go against the attempts to solve the problems of hunger and feeding the cities. So the MST for 40 years had been working for a people's land reform. And to that end, we have structured our presentation today. We have 4 points to cover. The first one is that Ceres and I will talk about solidarity based on the land reform and coming out of our organization as a rural land farm workers movement in Brazil, especially in our specific state of Paraná in southern Brazil, where we work. The second part of our presentation will be about the emergency plan that the MST has proposed for us to overcome the crisis. So at this time of the pandemic, in Brazil's economy and the world economy, where there's unemployment, so many people dying. So what does the MST propose for the people for Brazil to overcome the crisis? And our final point then will be on the right to healthy food and the right to life and preservation of life. So that'll be our logic. And then at the very end, we'll open up for you in the audience and other organizations to ask questions of us. So feel free during our conversation, and then we'll open up for questions live. So to begin, even with all the limitations of geography and languages, with those limitations, even so our peoples are able to resist against imperialism and capitalism. This unites us all as peoples who are workers and resisting against this capitalist project and resisting and to be able to build a different society that we believe in. So during this month of October, we have to remember Che Guevara when he said that we have to get harder, and we do need to harden up against our enemies, against hunger, against injustice, against imperialism. But we can never lose the tenderness amongst each other and solidarity. So we want to move in to begin, and that Sarah's could reflect, could share the MST's reflections on how the capitalist struggle being in solidarity, taking care of each other, protecting ourselves against the virus, against hunger, and to achieve humanization of human beings, and for us to be active. So we have the challenge of being active during the pandemic and to confront capitalism, but without being contaminated or losing anyone or any of our land. So Sarah's can share with people in the audience now, what are the actions that the MST has carried out in solidarity to deal with these times? Very, very fine. We always say that for us in the MST, we've discussed many different values, human values, for a better society, more humane society. Solidarity is one of these values that has to be shared as a fundamental value for us. We're a part of the working class, and for we who are a social movement struggling for the land as an ongoing activity, not just during this very grave crisis that we're experiencing now during the pandemic, where we have to take that into account, even though we're very active in solidarity. But historically, solidarity has been important for making us more humane and more equal amongst ourselves and with everyone else. So for the working class, we work with solidarity. If we look at the class breakdown, we have an objective and a reason to exist. We don't practice solidarity for itself. It's for us to reflect and understand our problems, our difficulties, and to understand the problems, analyze the problems of how to face up to our reality. Our solidarity has that character of trying to free and instigate, to encourage organization for the liberation of the working class as a whole. And it's directly linked to internationalism, as Adriana was saying, going beyond national borders in the struggles against all forms of injustice and oppression. It's part of the perspective of building a worldwide project under the control of the people and to meet the needs of the people. So it doesn't have to be just a national struggle. It has to fit into the needs of everyone. We're in our country, but we're beyond it as well. Like the Cuban doctors and physicians who go any place where they're needed in the world. That's the kind of solidarity we talk about. We have to be present where we're needed. And this solidarity is a little different than from charity. Actually, it has not much to do with charity. Solidarity goes against certain sense of charity. Solidarity means fighting over content and fighting for much more than just delivering food to people. We have many solidarity actions that carry a message with them. When we distribute food from our settlements and camps and the liberated land from the landholders, we are distributing content of healthy food and the right to food, the right to be able to eat with healthy food. And the concept, fighting over the concept of quality of life and food sovereignty. So it's not just, it's much more than giving food to those who are hungry. And we have to help educate each other. So our solidarity has a sense of accumulating strength within our land reform territories per se for the people, and also to mobilize and carry out solidarity, producing food effectively to be able to reach as many people as possible. And for society overall to realize the fruit of our work, which is food, but also our knowledge and our activity for people's health, for education, for culture. As when we take that out to society as a whole, the society sees that as the meaning of agrarian reform is they start defending us to promote us, and they help us build strength and build further actions of solidarity. And it also has a sense of organizing the larger masses. Our solidarity becomes a tool for other activities of the working class to organize, for the working class to be able to perceive that it is possible to organize, to transform the reality that we experience, whether to carry out the struggles in the countryside or in the cities. What we have learned from that is that we have been able to involve and more the camped out people, the land occupiers, and also the settled farmers. So these settled farmers around Brazil, also another 100,000 families who are camped waiting to be settled. That movement of people realizes the gravity of this movement, and they're working more and more to produce more food to take care of themselves against the pandemic, but also to be able to be in solidarity with those who are more and more in greater and greater need. Brazil is back on the map of hunger of the United Nations, and where the Workers' Party government had taken Brazil off of that map of hunger. And the role of the land settlements in our land reform cooperatives and our struggle to disseminate agroecology and healthy food, to make that more and more obvious to people. So that opens more possibilities for us to advance towards stronger settlements, to be able to build the countryside and the cities that are more just, but also to solidify our territories, especially those that have not been regularized or deeded yet, and struggling broader and broader, showing how fundamental it is to regularize those areas, to conquest the settlements and formalize those settlements to provide more food for the Brazilian people. And in the peripheries of the cities, although this is a very difficult and sad time for all of us, but we still find much hope, because in the peripheries of the cities, we find new leaders emerging, women, young people, different ethnic groups and cultural and religious groups, and where we help make a difference in building processes to organize the people on the peripheries of the cities. So we hope that our actions can help catalyze those processes and that we can help in that sense. And also, we work doing networking as well, despite the difficulties we have faced in being able to be on the streets because of the pandemics. We take great care because it's where the people are valuable in their health. They have to take care of themselves, but we work through networks doing propaganda and a lot of communication and broadcasts. That has become priority. So we'll show a video in a little bit, but first give some figures to exemplify what we're talking about. In Brazil, we have donated since the beginning of the pandemic more than 3,500 tons of food. And here in our state of Panama, in our own state, we have donated 431 tons of food. We have mobilized about 52 camps of landless peasants who are organized in occupying land, 120 settlements that are already part of the formal land reform, and another 20 communities of farm communities, quilombolas, and indigenous communities who are helping us to grow this solidarity, and we end up helping each other as well. in the Brazilian countryside. We've got 69 municipalities in the state of Paraná, and in Curitiba, the capital city of Paraná, where we're working to build this solidarity with agroecological food. We have donated more than 800,000 boxed lunches to people in poor neighborhoods and people that are street dwellers. And we'll be showing a video now that'll show you a little bit about the solidarity networks. And although some of this is out of date because this video is from May 2020, but the image still illustrate the kinds of faces and the kind of work that we are carrying out right now. There are English subtitles.
Sem terras, que
Now the
lutamos
sound
pela
is coming in.
reforma agrária e por projeto popular para o Brasil.
For a People's Project for Brazil.
Brasileira, desde a escravidão, nós tivemos
Ever since the times of slavery,
obras das panelas da Casa Grande. Nós tivemos de aprender uma nova
we've
língua
had to learn a new
para
language
podermos contar
so that
de
we
onde
could tell
quem
where
éramos,
we come from,
e combinar a fuga, os caminhos para encontrar os
to
quilombos.
find ways towards the quilombos and others.
Depois, na transição para o trabalho,
During the transition
juntamos as
to this
associações
kind of work,
mútuo,
we have the
caixas comuns,
mutual aid associations, boxes of food and bags,
para tratarmos dos nossos doentes, para enterrar os nossos mortos.
and also for us to work together to deal with the people who are ill, to help them get well, and to bury the victims.
A gente tem que pensar assim, né? Se fosse nós que estivesse lá, né? A gente ia ficar muito agradecido se tivesse alguém todo lá, né? Aí, como a gente está aqui bem, né?
Since we're here,
A gente se sente bem.
the sound is very broken up, unfortunately. It's not coming through well.
Nossas ações organizam as doações de alimentos, alimentos ricos produzidos
organizing the distribution of food with agroecological production
4 estados.
throughout 24 states in Brazil. Actions of solidarity.
Feijão,
1,200 tons of food have been donated. This is in May.
Nós reunimos mais de
The
20
beans, rice, coffee, cassava, 25,000 liters of milk
em pó.
have been donated. 40 tons of powdered milk
Distribuímos cerca de 50
and distributed
marmitas em
about
diferentes
50,000
entregamos
boxed lunches in many different cities,
cestas básicas.
delivering these food baskets.
Não estamos contentes com
And
isso.
also the
Cestas também vão livros, porque nós temos
not just hot meals, but bags
e
of
acreditamos que todos sentimos
food baskets to keep people going for a week.
A classe dominante disputa
The
seu
ruling class is still fighting to keep its power.
Os ricos
During the pandemic, the rich
falam
are
de
pretending to help. They talk about solidarity, but it's Solidarity Inc. SA.
Não há tanta filmar pra mostrar caridade. E ela não é anônima, é pura vaidade. O dinheiro é mais importante que a vida da gente.
500 tons of healthy food. Food donation, April
solidariedade
17th,
da qual falamos
throughout the state.
na nossa cultura, na nossa
In
história,
our culture and our history,
nas experiências de Jesus, por exemplo, com a passagem
in this experience where
estava
Jesus
no retiro e que tem uma multidão que os segue e depois
and
alguns
had a
estão com
whole
fome.
crowd following Jesus, and they were hungry.
Porém, Jesus orienta que essa forma de organização
Jesus said that this form of organization of the people
organização de grupos, primeiro
depends on organizing groups, first of all,
pessoas, e depois colocar em comum o que tinham.
putting small groups and then coming together
O
in
milagre não foi a
larger
mais
communities.
multiplicação, e sim
The miracle was not the multiplication of the bread, but
é
how people shared.
solidariedade que
And
falamos.
this solidarity that we talk
Tanta
about.
riqueza produzida por todos nós.
So much wealth produced by all of us.
E precisamos tratar. Nesse
So we
momento,
need to keep
diante
working
dessa
at this
pandemia,
time. During this
atualizando o
pandemic,
nosso entendimento de solidariedade.
we have to update our understanding of solidarity,
O organizador de nossas práticas.
to organize our practices.
Capacidade de doar alguma coisa para alguém que precisa. É um prazer que
Capacity to donate something to people that need it.
a satisfação da gente em poder
The way
ajudar.
we're satisfied to be able to help.
A vida lá fora não é igual aqui.
Because life out there is not like ours.
Sem veneno pra comer, pra vender, pra doar quem precisa e pra defender a reforma agrária, agricultura familiar. Comida na mesa só existe se plantar. Plantar e colher é a nossa prevenção, a minha e a sua de toda a população.
The rap music is also about the MST's work feeding the people and organizing.
Uma solidariedade baseada no
A
cuidado
solidarity based on care,
das vidas, com as vidas de todas as
caring
pessoas.
for lives, everyone's
Ter
lives.
atenção toda com os protocolos de saúde.
And we do all this work with great respect for the health protocols,
E se agravarão ao longo dos próximos meses.
and which will become even worse in coming months, we know.
Organização de planejamento do
So we
trabalho
organize and plan out our solidarity work
de longo prazo. Sob
for the
essa,
long term.
companheiras e companheiros,
So the brothers and sisters
os nossos militantes e as suas
are working
condições de equilíbrio físico e emocional.
to ensure the physical and emotional health of our own militants as well,
Uma dor humana mais profunda.
to deal with the human pain.
Nós nunca nos paralisamos.
But we never stop. We have not become paralyzed.
Aprendeu a transformar o
We have
luto
learned to transform a small group into a
quantos
movement.
anos ainda forem necessários.
And we'll keep going for as many years as it takes
Popular. Mas agora,
for the people's struggle. And now solidarity is necessary.
leva a propormos uma reforma agrária emergencial.
So this is an emergency land reform issue.
Urbanos, voltada
And
para
getting major large cities involved
os trabalhadores mais empobrecidos.
to serve the poorest sectors in the cities,
Essa dignidade de seres humanos
to ensure the dignity of human beings,
recusa a morrer de fome,
people who refuse to starve.
mas tão desigual. Que não
Things
nos
are so unequal.
que não nos falte forças,
We need to maintain our strength
a pedagogia do exemplo.
and work through the pedagogy of our example.
Eu espero que vocês tenham conseguido.
I hope you've been able to understand the video, to hear the text and the interpreting. And I hope that seeing that video, you can see the confrontation we've been facing in terms of food diversity as well. If you've noticed, when we talked about the tons of donations, in addition to just donating, we're getting beyond food habits, old patterns. Over 80 species of food, different types of beans, different kinds of corn, different kinds of squash and of fish, of vegetables and greens. So at this time, during the pandemic, to confront the strong monoculture in most of our country of soybeans and corn and cattle raising that have taught us how much biodiversity is being lost. So the way the peoples are confronting that to preserve the water and biodiversity in the land and our seeds as a heritage of humanity, this is how we confront imperialism. Our confrontation is also against the commodities, against monocropping here in Brazil. So actions of solidarity they also reflect our project with the agriculture. So when we look at the food that we give out in a boxed lunch, that shows the kind of solidarity we're building. When we look at the videos on the food diversity, that reflects our project for agriculture. And so the Brazilian population be able to be fed from the diversity produced by our lands, that our food habits not be standardized by the market. So we have 3 campaigns underway right now. The first one, during this month of October, is the Landless children who will carry on our struggle in the future. So from October 5th to 10th, we will be working with the landless children to be able to, those that will not be able to go back to their schools and their classes because going back to schools during the pandemic, so they're meeting this week as even online as a part of resistance by our children, the young people as well. And this week we are reaffirming this work of solidarity with planting trees, orchards, and gardens like our commander Che Guevara. And the other struggle we have carried out, and something you can help us with, is the International Day of Struggle Against Imperialism, which is the way we resist everything that's coming from the imperialist corporations attacking the peoples around the world. This is a struggle we're carrying out in Brazil as a landless peasant movement, as Via Campesina, and we ask for people around the world to be with us in fighting against imperialism. This is a time for resistance of the people. And with that, I would like to Ceres to speak to us now, so we'll share this, about this emergency plan, which is an experience we've gathered as the landless peasant movements against all of this, against hunger, unemployment, economic crisis, recession in our country. So what are the solutions that the landless peasants movement has accumulated? And what's our project? What do we want to build together with society at large? Go ahead, Ceres. Adriana. First of all, it's very important for us to understand that our priority work in these campaigns are focused on having hard-hitting actions that will be immediately helpful to the Brazilian people, to provide food that will be for people to make lunch or dinner, or maybe even be the only meal they have that day. So that's the immediate actions in our campaigns with the landless children and the anti-imperialist campaigns. They have that sense. But we've also understood that it's important to have long-term, medium to long-term solutions. So this month of June in 2020, we developed an emergency plan for land reform. We have a project for the Brazilian countryside. We put together and prepared an agrarian program that was approved in our National Congress that brings together theory and practice to find alternatives for the Brazilian countryside. During the pandemic, what we've been doing as a synthesis, an alternative, quick alternative for an emergency is this emergency land reform. to affirm to Brazilian society, to the authorities, that there are solutions to the crisis, and that those solutions depend on land reform. The dominant ideology in Brazil denies the need for agrarian reform, but we have found that need more and more evident. It's clearer and clearer and easier to perceive, unfortunately, because of the crisis and the environmental crimes that are underway in our country. Her voice got cut off. The deforestation of the Amazon and of the wetlands and of the savannas, these are environmental crimes, not just against human life, but all forms of life. The crimes of hunger, unfortunately, are affecting millions of Brazilian homes. Against all that, the MST has the Emergency Land Reform Project on four concrete fronts. The first one is land and work, to generate land reform by distributing land and multiplying jobs and activities. So land reform creates room for more and more people to work on the land in cooperation activities, all generated with the production of food from agribusiness in our settlements and camps in our day-to-day work. So in these first points of land and work, creating settlements are close to the big cities where the real demand for land and the need to have more production of healthy food, to have that link with employment. That's fundamental. The second point, directly linked to the first one, is the pillar of healthy food production. So we're moving towards producing the basis for food sovereignty. As Adriana said, that has to do with diversity, which means resilience and strength, and to determine our sovereignty. So with healthy food for people in the countryside and in the city, to eat well and eat right is a right. And we need to organize for more and more people to exercise their right to healthy food. The third point is to protect nature, water, and biodiversity. And once again, that goes against what agribusiness does. And we need to confront all those crimes of agribusiness and the forest fires, the burning of forests. We have to fight against those fires, against the elimination of biodiversity with new actions and policies that will not put an end to natural resources, but protect humanity. So that care for the environment is fundamental. And it's not by chance that during the pandemic, the MST, just before the pandemic in January, launched this national plan for planting trees. So for the next few years, we want to plant millions of trees all around Brazil. And we're having very good responses, motivating our rank and file, the communities, to involved in a national campaign to plant trees with the objective of taking care of our common assets of land and nature. And the fourth point in our emergency plan for land reform is for us to take care of and create dignified living conditions for the people in the countryside all over, to live well, to have more than just work and food, but to have dignity, to have decent housing, to have access to education, access to culture, to be able to live in a free environment and free of all forms of violence. So for us to create living conditions for all the men and women to live well, to be respected, and to respect each other. And so we need to eliminate inequalities, all forms of oppression, and all forms of violence, whether this is oppression and violence between generations against young people and children, or violence against women, or violence against the different sexual orientations that must be respected. And we have to have the basis for all these problems to be improved. Her sound got cut off again. Sadie's sound got cut off again. Adriana is waiting for her to come back. So that is the summary of our plan.
Cortou pouquinho, sério.
We got cut off a little bit, but we thought you were lost, but you're back. So before we go into our final block here, before the questions, we're talking about the access to healthy food and life. And the most important thing for the MST is to preserve life and take care of people. For us, production, we produce as food, not commodities or merchandise. So it's not just, we don't just to produce to make profits and have an output of commodities. For us, human beings need to have relations of equality. So hunger is something that we as a Brazilian people and as humanity overall, we could not believe that we have land, water, biodiversity, and still be able to accept hunger as something normal in our society's lives. So we in the MST are prepared to make donations. We have a calendar, a schedule now on October 16th for donation of food throughout all of Paraná and all of Brazil on the World Food Day. Every human being has a right to food. And we have also been carrying out activities to organize and help our rank and file, our communities, to carry out more activity. So we have 15 gardens and many other fields producing food in August and September, and it's recently started raining. So we have collective gardens that have three objectives. The first one is that people who are in that land, on that land, a settlement or a camp, so that they have enough food to confront the virus with healthy food and enough to eat, and then have an agenda for their food production. And third, to carry out solidarity actions from these collective gardens and fields. We have several gardens. Now we are working, and hopefully by December we'll have thousands of gardens throughout our state. Another emergency action is the boxed lunches that are distributed in the capital city in Curitiba. This week we had distributed 20,000 boxed lunches to placate the hunger of the street dwellers and also people in poor neighborhoods, living in poor neighborhoods. And that creates a possibility for organizing these people as well. So some communities, Vila Formosa and other neighborhoods, are working collectively to put together kitchens to fight the hunger of people in emergency situations so that nobody die or be weak from hunger, and that we be able to organize people's collective resistance in the neighborhoods. And other actions are the community bakeries. There are several bakeries, and new bakeries are trying out to work together with the community kitchens, as well as more health agencies. Health agents, we are doing online courses in different cities of Brazil, where these people's health agents are responsible for a block on a street or a neighborhood for a group of people, and they give guidance and help people regarding the virus and how to deal with hygiene, cleanliness, and taking care of the virus. The periphery, the poor neighborhoods, are the places where most people have died from this virus, the coronavirus. The pandemic, the poor people, Black men and women and the children are being cared for by more and more community health agents, and we are expanding that work as well. So I'd ask Ceres now to talk to us a little bit about the right to healthy food and caring for life and caring for people, the kind of work we've been doing as a landless peasants movement. Can you take over, Ceres? I'll be brief for us to take advantage of this space to get some questions and interact with you all. So I want to reaffirm that the struggle for land reform and the landless MST's struggle is a struggle for life. It's peasants who are fighting for the people, for the right to live well, to live and to live well. That's our outlook as the MST. That's our outlook as the working people in Brazil. To be able to carry out struggles against all forms of injustice and oppression, and to carry out struggles that allow us to live and to live better. So maybe now we can show our second video on the emergency land reform plan, and then we can open up for questions. Does that sound okay? Emergency land reform plan.
Buscando a libertação da terra.
These are people fighting for freedom on the land.
Seres humanos, algumas gramas de chumbo, moldados em balas que fazem sangrar o destino do nosso povo sofredor.
People who are working to overcome the suffering of our people.
Dos nossos sonhos, trincheiras
our dreams
que revela a rebeldia dos poetas e dos cantadores.
To reveal the rebelliousness of the poets and our cultural leaders,
guerreiros e lutadores sem terra.
The warriors and strugglers for the land.
Através das nuvens de poeira provocadas pelos rígidos que seguem destemidos, construindo esta grande irmandade.
The clouds of dust from dirt, all fighting and struggling for the land reform.
Segue rompendo as cercas na busca de uma vida digna para todos.
For a dignified life for everyone.
Anos de luta, milhares de assentados e acampados.
Thousands of landless peasants and settled peasants are working together. Amongst many different activities by the landless peasants are to work to defend people's health and to produce more agroecological food.
Doando os alimentos que produzem.
Donating the food they produce.
Deram ser somente dividido a partir da possibilidade da reforma agrária.
And this is only possible because of the land reform that has already been carried out.
E fruto destas lutas.
As a fruit of those struggles.
Mas isso não é o suficiente. Precisamos continuar.
But handing out food is not enough. We have to continue organizing for more, to win more rights. The struggle continues. We need to fight for dignified working conditions, living conditions in the countryside.
é garantir
And so fighting for the land reform is to ensure living conditions
todos e todas.
for
Assim,
all men and women,
todos que moram no campo tenham acesso a moradia digna.
to have access to dignified housing.
Precisamos também garantir oportunidades para
We
nossos
also need to have chances, more opportunities for our young people,
campo, com geração de trabalho, de
and
renda,
generate more employment and income
no campo, com
and
qualidade,
education,
ser respeitada e defendida como uma bandeira fundamental. Por
a
isso,
fundamental banner of our movement.
e temos que lutar por políticas públicas.
We need to fight for public policies, ongoing public policies,
Em todos os níveis de escolaridade,
and for schools at all levels of schooling,
violência, impedindo
from children to adults education,
no campo, atingindo cada vez mais as mulheres, as crianças, os
including more and more the women, the children, and the adolescents,
especialmente nesse período de distanciamento social.
especially in this period of social distancing. We need to be very careful.
Meio rural também, como uma forma
Throughout the country, including the countryside,
fundamental para todo o povo brasileiro.
we're carrying out struggles that are fundamental for the entire Brazilian people.
Verdade se converte em sonho. O grito
And
forte
freedom is our dream.
na trilha estreita, plantando o futuro.
We're planting the future.
Eu não sei agora como que
We're not sure now. Will Lauren come back on now and take over coordinating?
Hello, David, do you want to read out the questions or do you want me to?
They're on the screen, so I'll read them into Portuguese. You've got them already written down. Okay.
Okay.
a gente já responde, Laura? Já vamos direto, né? A gente tem debate muito forte no movimento sem terra.
There's a major discussion in the Landless Peasants movement on the importance of the participation and the creation of conditions for landless women to be active as leaders and protagonists in the struggle for land and for land reform. For us, we have consolidated our understanding for decades that the struggle without women does not exist. We have to have the families with young people and children, and to fight for a different society, we have to fight for the end of patriarchy, that form of oppression that has chauvinism, machismo. So we have to struggle for land reform, but we cannot do it without struggling, without a feminist struggle for gender equality and creating conditions for women to be protagonists as well. In March this year, we carried out the first national mass meeting of women, landless women in Brasilia for 4 days before the quarantine, and how we can strengthen our own organization as landless people, and especially landless women, and within a struggle for feminism, because without feminism we do not have agroecology or land reform, and without feminism we will not have socialism, no doubt. So we have to fight against all forms of oppression, and our priority has been to confront the patriarchy, and we need to destructure the grounds, the origins of that gender inequality. So we have to deconstruct class society, including patriarchy.
What is the Brazilian mainstream perception of MST, and how has that changed during different administrations?
o MST, o Brasil é país continental.
Brazil is a continental-sized country, the scale of the US in size. So the MST, over the years, has territorialized itself, getting roots in each state of the country, some of them very much interior. So the landless peasant movement MST is well known in different parts of the country and locally. They know, people are aware of our camps of land occupations and the land reform settlements that have been growing over the decades. And as we have carried out our struggles through mobilizations, through marches, through land takeovers, and other educational work with society, then Brazilian society has had a chance to get to know us. It's important to say, it may sound contradictory. Internationally, the MST is much more well known as the way we are, as a democratic movement struggling for the land and for life in solidarity, as we explained in the beginning of our session, but particularly inside Brazil, as a movement which is in direct conflict and antagonistic against the hegemonic movement of agribusiness in the countryside. So there's a confrontation of ideas and an ongoing struggle that's in fight. So there's a dominant ideology and narratives that says that the MST is anti-democratic, that it's against dialogue, that they only take over land, they destroy private property. And that's all a lie. It's a big lie. So with the pandemic has made it clear, with all the dramatic situations and difficulties for everyone, and all of our actions of solidarity, and even with our actions in networking, sharing our message about the MST the way it really is, many people have really been able to effectively get to know our movement and to see what we really are and what we're building. So these messages that we have carried out in actions of solidarity through food, through dialogue, and effectively through what we do and build in our day-to-day activities. And generally, we were not able to reach so many people in Brazilian society with our solidarity action. This is multiplied during the pandemic, and we've done what we can. Much of the Brazilian population has discovered who the MST really is and what it means. And the fact that the real MST is for democracy in the countryside, for social justice, for gender equity, for better life forms of living, and for healthy food. This is the MST that really is a reality and that we have built over these years, especially now during the pandemic, to be able to demonstrate and be recognized by Brazilian society.
Many people outside of Brazil have heard about the Belo Horizonte food policy that ended hunger. What is the local perception of this perceived successful policy?
Provavelmente está se tratando de uma política pública
I think that's a public policy that was implemented against hunger, in fighting hunger in the city of Belo Horizonte. There have been several similar policies as well, as food security policies during the Workers' Party governments from 2003 to 2016. And we implemented many policies in Brazil that allowed us to stimulate food production based on structuring production in the countryside, and also the marketing through cooperation and the building institutionalized markets that help to promote the food production as well as the consumption of access to that food. So over the years, we have built public policies that have allowed us to massify healthy food production in Brazil, and also to make sure that that food actually reaches people's tables, of children in schools, at school lunches, and hospitals, and people that are in situations of vulnerability in urban poor areas. By promoting family food production and marketing. However, one of the serious consequences of the current situation, that we have to go back to the situation of hunger in recent years, is that we have not achieved food sovereignty. So unfortunately, we have food insecurity, a lack of security in Brazil, once again returning, where people are once again vulnerable with the change from one government to another. So some governments have established food security programs that are more successful than others. But overall, what we've seen with the breakdown of public policies that were carried out earlier in the past couple of decades, but we see the breakdown of that concretely. So we have major food insecurity, and also in terms of the ideas available to people. So with those policies, unfortunately, we have not made progress towards overcoming the underlying causes, so that we can make progress once and for all in the fight against hunger. We have to fight ignorance. We have to have more, allow us to get together with fighting hunger. As such, we have to restructure society to be able to put an end once and for all to hunger and achieve food sovereignty, so that we have more and more food vulnerability in our country for that reason.
Does land loss and land theft disproportionately affect indigenous and minority populations in Brazil?
Seguramente um impacto direto.
Yes, it's a direct impact. Our indigenous peoples have suffered with genocide carried out for 500 years, negating our origins, the origins of the indigenous peoples, the oppression historically, and the criminal aggression, violent aggression, the intensification of land grabbing and the non-demarcation of indigenous lands, and with all the change in legislation, not only are the original peoples and quilombolas lands not being recognized, and even the landless peasants' lands not being recognized and maintained. So there's a need for legislation and actually there are proposals for new laws that would deregulate the land reform the way it is in Brazil. So we're facing the threats of legal setbacks in legal terms, in terms of new laws being proposed that would make it worse, especially for the original peoples and the descendants of former slaves, the quilombolas.
Do you collaborate with any organizations from outside Brazil? And how can organizations or people from different countries collaborate for land rights?
A gente entende que a
It's our understanding that, as we said at the beginning, the struggle for land and land reform is an international struggle, and solidarity is an international banner amongst all peoples. And we've always had the practice in the MST to work on cultivating internationalism as a value. And we network and interrelate with people's organizations and peasants' organizations from around the world. An international network of organizations, a peasant organization, is called Via Campesina. So we were the representatives of Via Campesina in Brazil. They're present on continents around the world, in the southern part of the world, and also in the struggle against imperialism and capitalism. We have been building united actions as part of an assembly of peoples, which is another international action to build unity around our banners as peoples of the world. As MST in several countries of Europe and Asia, and including the United States, there are committees of friends of the MST who carry out solidarity and disseminate information and support for our struggle in those countries. So that's the practice we have, which has been very valuable for us. And we need to be able to internalize not just our own struggle and talk about the difficulties we faced in Brazil, but also to be able to share our message of hope, of unity, of building a better world for all these friends that we have gained around the world.
David, we have one more question that was not put up on the screen. It's, can the panelists discuss the current pressure MST is under due to the Bolsonaro government?
A gente enquanto MST, mas o povo.
It's not just the MST, it's the people as a whole who have felt the direct impact of this government, the genocide government. It's against the people, it's corrupt, it's propagating the discourse of hate and of violence, and with consequences not just from the government, but from society overall. So Brazilian society is extremely violent when we look at the impacts of social evils, inequalities in our society, the lack of access to land, to water, to food, to employment, to dignified lives. It's an extremely violent society in those terms, but also violent in terms of direct physical violence. And this has been aggravated with this neo-fascist movement that's being promoted by the Bolsonaro government. That has a direct impact on our society, in people's imaginations. A third of the population is identified with this discourse, in this government, this hate speech. When the practice is also very significant. In practice, there are major conflicts and impacts. We have been trying to build more and more our position in favor of peace in the countryside, peace through social justice, peace through democracy, through regularizing our lands and recognition of our rights. But unfortunately, as a Brazilian people, we have suffered these actions of intolerance, of hate, and of violence that's growing in our country, unfortunately, yes.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Adriana and Ceres. Before we ask for a final statement, I want to encourage everyone here to follow and support today's speakers. go to mstbrazil.org and follow them on Instagram. You can also find them throughout social channels. They have an incredible audience and support network. Please, if you do not follow MST already, follow them, listen, and learn. Thank you so much. Next week, we have an amazing session about Nicaragua's failed revolution with Lottie Cunningham, Josh Mayer, and Honorata Matal of the Oakland Institute. That will be in partnership with Oakland Institute. It will be exposing Sandinistas government's failed revolution in the way that they're treating indigenous communities. Now, please, everyone, tune in every week to learn and to listen to these excellent and incredibly inspiring stories. I want to thank Agroecology Fund, an organization that isn't scared to support the groups on the ground, that isn't scared to stand up in solidarity with peasants, workers, farmers, and producers all over the world. Saris and Adriana, please, would you share any closing statements before we end the session?
Posso começar, Sérgio? Pode.
I'll start. Okay, Adriana. In the name of the Landless farm workers movement, we thank you for this invitation to be here. And we, even during the pandemic, were able to receive with great caution visits of people who do want to visit us. And even at this time, we have a poet here called Tiago de Mello, who said that it's dark, but I sing. So at this time of pandemic, a delicate time, we sing. We sing in the name of building a different kind of society, denying capitalist society. And together we will build another society with socialist values. So thank you, and we'll see you soon, hopefully. I thank you as well, says Sadis. Thank you for this chance to bring this message, to have this dialogue with so many people that are committed to social justice. And so, Lauren, through you, I would like to say we like even the name of this program, Hunger for Justice. I remember my grandmother would said that it's lunchtime, so we can bless our food and say, good Jesus, bless the food on our table and on the table of the poor, and bless those who are hungry and hunger for justice and for food. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Isn't it Pablo Neruda?
I think
who says, a great poet, who says, for now I ask no more than the justice of eating. So together we hunger for justice. Together we hunger for global solidarity and a wonderful society for us all. I think that's it. Is there anything else? Okay. Thank you, everyone.